They killed Queenie, the 8-pound bass that met me at the dock every sunrise, and when I scooped her from the neon green water and felt the slick weight go limp in my hands, the metallic reek of chemicals climbed into my throat and told me exactly what happened before the sun did. The HOA hadn't just poisoned my lake to spite my fishing. They'd unknowingly poisoned themselves. Because the spring that feeds my water is the same one that runs under their polished cul-de-sacs, the same vein their kitchen faucets drink from, and the woman who ordered the dump has no idea she just set off a chain reaction with her own glass at the end of it. My name is Logan Wells. I'm 52, a retired electrician turned solar installer, and my family's 12 acres with a spring-fed lake, Founders Lake, have sat on the edge of Cedar Bluff, Georgia since 1952 when my grandfather hammered in boundary posts that outlasted his boots. I still walk that path at dawn, gravel underfoot. Honeysuckle riding the air, cypress shadows long on the water, while herons stitch the shoreline with slow wings. 15 years ago, developers paved the old tobacco fields into Maple Crest Estates. 847 tidy roofs, a private Facebook group, and lawn crews that arrive like marching bands. They flash me big numbers to buy the acreage and turn the lake into a clubhouse jewel, and I told them politely to build their clubhouse in hell. Most folks jogged by with waves and questions about base, but then Sloan Whitaker moved in. White luxury SUV detailed weekly, leather portfolio at barbecues, a voice that can turn coffee orders into cross-examination. And within 6 months, she slid into the HOA presidency like she'd been born holding a gavel, mailing me certified letters about unsightly fishing activities and a non-compliant dock that stood since Reagan, insisting their aesthetic standards applied to me. My attorney Elliot Crane nearly spit his coffee. Pre-HOA property isn't bound by retroactive covenants. My deed predates their rulebook. When paper threats didn't crack me, Sloan escalated to noise. 6 a.m. leaf blowers, chainsaws, and mowers revved. On the property line, whenever I cast a line, diesel haze drifting across clear water until dawn smelled like freeway. She filed a county complaint about an illegal structure. The inspector saw my 1987 permits, apologized for the trip, and left. Then came a high-gloss survey crew with lasers and GPS gear worth more than my truck, clicking away 6 hours to discover my dock crossed 6 inches into community water. 6 inches. Her lawyer filed suit. Her Facebook chorus grew loud about neighborhood standards, and a cascade of clipboards arrived. Fish and wildlife, something about migratory birds and my lure, code enforcement, even a health officer, each departing with nothing because there was nothing to find. I learned a long time ago that the best counterpunch is knowledge. So I went to the courthouse basement where fluorescent lights hum like hornets and dust tastes like old paper, and I started pulling files. That's where I found the paragraph that turned my pulse into a drum. My grandfather's deed grants all surface and subsurface water rights to the spring system in perpetuity. In perpetuity, forever. The spring that feeds Founders Lake keeps flowing underground beneath Maple Crest Estates, and those sparkling well houses dip their straws straight into water my family owns. Ruth Ellery, a retired county clerk with a memory like a ledger, added the other shoe. The subdivision sits on protected wetlands the developer promised to preserve to get his permits. Violate that, and federal teeth sink in. Meanwhile, I'd been filming the landscaping crews who love to gun engines at dawn. The third Saturday, I caught Pristine Greens, a company 40% owned by Graham Whitaker, Sloan's husband, dumping bagged yard waste into a vegetated inlet that feeds the spring, clippings and fertilizer sloughing into water like slow poison. I sent timestamps and GPS tag photos to the state and EPA. By Wednesday, contracts started peeling off. Pristine greens like paint in a storm. You'd think that kind of fire would make a person step back. Sloan grabbed a gas can. While I was in Savannah visiting my sister, she hired Blue Line Aquatics. Lied that Founders Lake was community property, paid $3,500 cash, and ordered a midnight copper sulfate blitz. When I rolled up Sunday night, the lake glowed antifreeze green and the silence felt loud. No dragonflies, no plops, only the soft slap of dead fish at the riprap. Queenie floated 20 feet off the dock, skin iridescent as a broken CD under porch light. A county environmental Officer tested the water. Strips went colors nature doesn't make. And my independent lab report came back with copper levels 4 times EPA limits. The electrician in me connected the circuit. Same aquifer, same wells, same toxins spreading under sidewalks toward 847 kitchen sinks. This wasn't just my grief. This was a public health grenade rolling down their cul-de-sacs. You don't swing a legal nuke alone, you build a crew. I called environmental attorney Maya Ellison, who sues polluters for sport, hydrogeologist Dr. Colin Hart from the State University, who maps groundwater like a subway system, and investigative journalist Jenna Cross, who's turned 2 crooked HOA boards into case studies. We laid the board on the kitchen table and kept it simple: federal water rights action. 15 years of unauthorized extraction, EPA emergency intervention, ongoing contamination, state dumping charges, the midnight algae side, civil claims, property destruction, emotional distress, and a media plan to keep truth louder than rumor. One more piece: mercy. I could calculate roughly $30 million in backwater use fees, but innocent families shouldn't pay for one tyrant. If the HOA funds full restoration, installs independent oversight, and Sloan resigns, I'll waive back fees. Not soft, strategic. While tests mapped contamination creeping outward in slow rings. The neighborhood Facebook page filled with posts about metallic coffee, kids' stomach aches, and a dog that wouldn't drink. Sloan posted that seasonal mineral fluctuations were normal, then tried bribing Blue Line to delete their service records. Their owner recorded the call. Environmental vendors keep meticulous logs because someday someone calls with a suitcase and a problem. Sloan hired a discount PI who stalked me in a parking lot until the sheriff cuffed him for tugging my truck handle. She filed anonymous complaints with the contractor board about my solar business. That devoured 2 weeks of paperwork and cleared me with a yawn. After her smear posts cost me 2 customers and someone spray-painted a slur on my tailgate, Elliot suggested a wire. Georgia's one-party consent law makes clean audio a friend you carry under your shirt. It paid off when Sloan showed up at sunset with a leather briefcase and $100,000 in cash for a mutual non-disclosure and a promise I'd de-escalate. The recorder heard her say reasonable settlement. The law heard attempted bribery. And the briefcase snapped shut like a trap when I told her to leave. EPA field teams rolled into Maple Crest Estates on a Tuesday with pumps and probes that looked NASA-adjacent. Dr. Sandra Murphy from the agency stood in my kitchen with a map of the aquifer, a red plume ghosting under the subdivision like a slow bruise, and she didn't sugarcoat the timeline. 6 to 8 weeks to full spread without mitigation, copper above safe limits in multiple wells. Already, public advisory recommended. Realtor smiles wilted overnight. Nothing erases property value like a federal warning on tap water. Graham Whitaker stepped out of the Whitaker house with a duffel, filed for separation, and Sloan's lawyer withdrew. The HOA board called an emergency meeting. Parents arrived carrying bills and bottled water, and 3 directors asked for receipts for a mysterious $3,500 line item. None appeared. That's embezzlement in most zip codes. Patricia Morgan, quiet, competent, called for a vote to suspend Sloan pending investigation. Fire met wind. We waited for the biggest room in town, the Cedar Bluff Community Center, to fill until people lined the walls and TV trucks hummed on the curb. Deputies posted at exits. Patricia opened with the agenda, EPA findings, water rights clarification, action plan, and handed the projector remote to Dr. Murphy, who clicked to a slide that made 300 people stop breathing. Test points. Numbers in red 4 times the safety threshold, arrows pointing from Founders Lake through sand and limestone to their wells. Origin point, industrial copper sulfate dump, she said. And the laser dot landed on my shoreline. A voice called, "Who did it?" And Dr. Murphy said, "Ongoing criminal investigation," while her eyes found Sloan on the stage. Patricia called my name. I walked up with a folder and a heartbeat like a snare drum. "Most of you know me as the stubborn guy who kept fishing," I said. "What you don't know is that my grandfather's 1952 deed grants my family all surface and subsurface water rights to this spring system in perpetuity." I read it slow. Heads turn like sunflowers. "For 15 years your wells have pulled from a source we own. I'm not here to bankrupt you. If we do the right thing together, I will waive the back fees." The room exhaled, then inhaled when Maya Ellison stood and outlined charges: illegal dumping, obstruction, embezzlement, water rights theft. Jenna Cross nodded from the press row, a notebook filling with the beats of a fall. A deputy walked up the side aisle, and when Patricia yielded the microphone to Sloan, she tried to pivot into victim. "This is a smear by a man with a history of, ma'am," the deputy said. "I have a warrant." The cuffs clicked. She turned on the crowd, spitting words about rednecks and lies, and 3 cameras caught the mask sliding off. "That's the justice. The ending is what you build afterward." Dr. Hart and Dr. Murphy designed an 18-month restoration. Controlled flushing, aeration, activated carbon barriers at specific seep points, native aquatic plantings to drink residual metals, and staged restocking once numbers say go. The HOA voted to fund it with insurance and restitution. Oversight falls to an independent committee with residents, a scientist, and a county observer. I signed a waiver for giving back water use fees and filed a covenant that prevents any future board from touching Founders Lake without my written consent and a third-party ecological review. Sloan Whitaker pled out, federal time, probation, $75,000 restitution, and 200 hours of work restoring streams she once harmed. Her real estate license now lives in a drawer marked never again. Graham sold his stake in Pristine Greens to pay fines from the dumping case. Patricia runs meetings with sunlight and receipts. The board adopted transparency rules and a homeowner bill of rights that specifically bans weaponizing bureaucracy against pre-existing properties. Ruth Ellery grinned like a proud aunt at the signing. By the first spring after the dump, fingerling bass flickered in the coves at dawn, dragonflies drew blue lines over water that had lost its chemical sheen, and the herons came back to their dry cypress thrones. EPA tests ticked down to zeros, the advisory lifted. We launched the Founders Lake Stewardship program with settlement funds, field trips for schools, Saturday workshops on groundwater, junior angler clinics, quarterly reports posted online with numbers and plain English explanations. On Saturdays, I opened the dock to Maple Crest families with catch and release only and a bucket for donations that buys more saplings for the shaded bank. Kids who watch their parents panic now watch. Lines arc and settle, and I get to say, keep your thumb on the spool, the way my grandfather told me when the world was smaller and the air smelled like the same clean minerals it does again now. She crushed my trash can 57 times with a luxury SUV. So I poured a new one out of concrete and watched her total her own bumper instead. By the time the dust settled, she was facing criminal charges, a $12,000 settlement, and a neighborhood that finally saw who'd been playing tyrant behind a clipboard. My name is Caleb Morgan, an electrician and dad of 2, living on a corner lot in Maple Brook Reserve, Indiana. The villain of this saga is Tricia Langford, our self-appointed compliance officer, best friend to HOA President Howard Creighton. Every Tuesday at 6:15 a.m., her pearl-white SUV grazed the curb, accidentally nuked my bin, and sped off. Elderly neighbor Mrs. Elena Novak whispered what my Ring camera later proved. She aimed for it. When I cited city code bins within 3 feet of the curb on pickup day, Tricia fired back a violation citing a made-up rule and threatened $50 daily fines. My attorney, Claire Benton, confirmed it. HOA jurisdiction ends at the property line. Public right-of-way. My container, my rights. The ramming continued. Crack, scrape, silence, until I stopped replacing cans and started documenting. I logged collisions, captured license plates, and got a survey confirming perfect placement. A buddy at City Hall, Evan Chambers, flagged 4:47 a.m. anonymous complaints with identical wording. Then came the smear posts, the fake safety panic, and the parking lot tirade where Tricia sneered about people like you, while my pocket recorder quietly ran. That night, I measured grass across the subdivision and photographed a dozen worse offenders, including Howard Creighton's lawn, while only my mailbox, weathered navy, drew fines. Pattern noted. Act 2, the counterpunch. At Home Depot, concrete vet Brett Sandoval reminded me nothing in code bans materials. I rebuilt this same plastic shell, drainage holes, and a 60 pounds rebar-laced core. Legally a bin, physically a bollard. Next Tuesday, thunk. Her running board folded. Mikan didn't flinch. She hit it again. More damage. I sipped coffee. She filed an insurance claim. My video montage of 50-plus deliberate rams sent it to the fraud unit. She sent a building inspector. Rick Donnelly glanced, shrugged. It's a trash can. She planted a GPS tracker under my truck. Deputy Alan Rios opened a stocking case. Meanwhile, board member Naomi Delgado slipped me budgets that didn't add up. A little sleuthing found Whitmore Services, LLC, owned 40% by Tricia Langford, landing 7 HOA contracts, each underbidding by $50 to $100 and approved by Tricia. $47,000 redirected from dues to her family. Conflict of interest documented. Act 3, the reveal. We packed the clubhouse. Maintenance lead Rafael Cruz rolled in my concrete can as exhibit. A. Investigative reporter Lena Park set up cameras. I walked the room through city code, selective enforcement, the GPS tracker, the insurance fraud, and finally the contracts, 7 votes. 7 payouts, 0 disclosures. Gasps. Deputy Alan Rios stepped forward with a warrant. Tricia melted down on live TV, grabbing my boards as neighbors restrained her. The board voted, unanimous. Suspension, independent audit, and open bidding going forward. Within days, charges filed, insurance claim denied, $47,000 recovered for homeowners, and a civil check for $12,000 landed in my mailbox. Tricia resigned, moved away, and her SUV, battle-scarred by physics, became a cautionary meme. Cinematic close, the indestructible can now sits in our lobby with a plaque, property rights. Protected, 2025. Kids climb the new playground we funded with recovered money. Naomi Delgado runs transparent meetings. Monthly ledgers post online. Bids are public. Conflicts disclosed in writing. And on Tuesdays at 6:15, the only sound is the quiet roll of a garbage truck doing its job. No crunch, no scrape, no bullies. Open question for you. Was the concrete can fair self-defense or a trap? That went too far? Should selective enforcement bullies face criminal charges or just for calls and refunds? Drop your judgment below, share your own HOA war stories, and tell us where you draw the line between community standards and plain old harassment.